Hello, inspection community, and welcome. My name's Alan Carson, and today we're going to talk about 10 things that I think are super important to do before the inspection. They're things that are going to make you look better and keep you out of trouble a little bit. Okay, let's get right to it. So the first one is, I think it's really important to set realistic expectations between you and your client. And as home inspectors, we have a really clear idea of what we're supposed to be doing. We're familiar with our standards of practice. We know our stuff. Unfortunately, we sometimes assume that our clients know our stuff too. And the reality is they don't. They don't have a clear expectation at all, especially if they're first-time buyers, of what a home inspection includes. So left to their own devices, they think you're going to tell them all kinds of interesting stuff about whether they should buy the house, whether the price is right, what the heating bills are. You're going to talk about the alarm system and cosmetics, and probably include building code stuff and bylaws. Well, we all know that none of that is part of what we do, but our clients don't. And so I'm going to encourage you to make sure you make that clear. And there's lots of opportunities to do that. Your website is one. When people call to book an inspection is another. Your confirmation email, your inspection agreement are a couple of others. The beginning of the inspection on site is yet another. And perhaps even reiterating it in your report is not a bad idea. And again, if everybody understands the rules of the game, that's critically important to manage liability and customer satisfaction. So in my mind, perfectly happy to have our clients hold our feet to the fire within the scope of work that we have. I don't want anything to do with outside of that. And if we can all agree, this is what we're going to do, that's what we're not going to do, it just makes life so much simpler. Patently obvious, but it doesn't get done all the time. Okay, let's move on. Referencing your standards of practice. So I touched on standards of practice. Now, I'm really hoping all of you follow one, and I don't care which one. There is pretty significant overlap in all the standards of practice that I'm familiar with. So pick one, and there are a couple of points I wanted to make about that. Firstly, make sure your client has access to it. And it can be in the inspection agreement, which I think it should, again, on the website, maybe, in the finished report, which is kind of after the fact and less important in my opinion, but nice for documentation for later on. Now, people ask me, should I put the entire standards of practice in or a link? And my answer is, I don't care. I think either one works fine, and I think either one is defendable. If push comes to shove down the road, you want to be able to prove that your client was directed to look at the standards of practice before the inspection. And that's probably all you need to do. The reality is less than 1% of your clients are going to read the standards of practice anyway. It's not exactly light reading and it's not exactly entertaining. So they won't read it. You need to provide it and you need to be able to prove that you did that. Okay? Lastly, the leverage that you can use with your standards of practice is to be able to say, I'm not making up the rules of the game. This is a North America-wide profession, and we are going to govern ourselves by our professional standards. So you're not saying what you're going to inspect and what you're not going to inspect. You are not some cowboy making up the rules. You are following a broadly accepted set of guidelines. And there's power and strength in that. So leverage that to your advantage. Okay, let's move on. Now, I'm kind of laughing at me putting this slide up because I very often disagree with my peers, and this is one example. So I am a big proponent of inviting the clients to attend the whole inspection. And I know there are a lot of inspection companies across America right now that are telling their clients only to show up for the last 15 minutes or the last 30 minutes of the inspection. We'll summarize everything for you and life will be grand. Well, I absolutely understand how it's easier to inspect a house without a client there. and you can move more quickly, you can focus and concentrate. Lots of advantages to that. However, the counterpoint to that and the overriding one for me is that I think of a home inspection as a 2.5 hour course in home ownership. I want to guide that client through the house and have them understand it exactly as I understand it by the time we get to the end of the inspection. Another important element to me in having your client there is they get to see how hard you work and they appreciate what you do for them. We get tons of customer reviews that absolutely appreciate the professionalism and the depths to which we go to look after clients. And that includes getting up on roofs, getting into the attic, pulling things apart, getting into crawl spaces. They see what you do for them, they appreciate it, and that helps to build a relationship. And at the end of the day, friends don't sue friends. So I think there are lots of reasons to have the client come through from start to finish. I understand it may take a little longer sometimes, it may be a little more work, but to me, we are in the communication business, and there is no better communication than one-on-one, face-to-face, where you can point to a crack and say, here's why it's a big deal, or here's why it's not a big deal. Wanted to let you know I saw this, don't worry about it. Whatever it is, that first person singular, real world, in-field experience to me can't be beat. I think you need to do it. Okay, let me continue my rant. Okay, Horizon is our inspection software, and a lot of you folks probably use Horizon. Those who don't use Horizon yet, welcome. Flick these two switches, that'll take you about 1.5 seconds, as I say. But I am going to tell you that I want you to use these because they protect you. If the client has not accepted your contract, or if they have not yet paid you for your inspection, these switches prevent the client from accessing the report. So the beautiful thing about it is you don't need to change your routine. You write your report, you publish your report, you send it to the client. You don't have to stop and wonder, now, has the client paid? Have they accepted the contract yet? Doesn't matter. The system figures it out. And if the client hasn't done both, they don't get to see the report. There is a ton of stuff built into Horizon, and it's because we built it for ourselves, for our own home inspection company. So we've got 16 guys out there crashing around, and I want to make them consistent, and I want to make their lives easier. So this is one example of how Horizon makes your life easier. It takes stuff off your plate, and there's less for you to have to remember to do. So this is a set it and forget it one-time thing, covers your butt. You do not want clients getting reports without having the contract accepted. There's a liability issue there. And of course, you want to be paid for your good work. So use these, piece of cake, one-time setup, and you're done. Love it. Okay, I'm going to touch on this. It's pretty self-evident, but people sometimes get confused. There is all kinds of insurance. When people say, are you insured? Well, what does that mean? Is your vehicle insured? Absolutely. Do you have office contents for your home office? Sure. But what I'm talking about is a couple of other things. Well, to be honest, 4 other things. So errors and omissions, or professional liability, which some people call it, I think you should have. Some inspectors say, I don't want to be insured because then if somebody sues me, I can say I don't have any insurance and they'll go away. I think that's a head in the sand, hope is not a strategy kind of approach. So I'm not a big fan of that. I like errors and omissions insurance, and I understand there's a cost to it. I also understand that it's cyclical and sometimes it costs more than others, but I think you need to consider it very seriously. The other insurance that people don't think about is CGL, or commercial general liability. And that is the stuff that insures you if you break somebody's fancy vase, or if you put a ladder through a window. That insurance protects you against any damage you do to the home you're in. The third thing I'll mention is short and long-term disability. I've been around for 43 years and I've had too many of my friends and colleagues get hurt. And when you're in the home inspection business and you're a sole proprietor, if you get banged up and you can't work, you're not making any money. Short and long-term disability insurance protects you under those circumstances. Now, I often get people ask me about WSIB or workers' comp. Same thing. What I would say is, first of all, check the jurisdiction that you're working in. You may be required by law to have it. We were for a while in our jurisdiction and now we're not. So it can come and go. Need to be aware of that. Now, the reason I mentioned short and long-term disability instead of WSIB is here's the difference. WSIB covers you if you get hurt at work. Short and long-term disability cover you if you get hurt anywhere. Weekends, evenings, don't have to be at work, don't have to be thinking about work. It's a broader coverage. It provides better protection that way. Is there a cost to it? Absolutely. Is it a significant part of your operating budget for a small company? Absolutely not. So, good thing to do. Health and dental insurance is another one. Again, most home inspectors don't have a big corporate benefits plan. There are lots of associations who provide access to these things on a group basis. If you don't belong to a home inspection association, I think you should seriously consider it. This is one example of the many benefits of joining an association. Okay, enough on insurance. Okay, here's another thing that I really like to do, and it's funny how often we get thanked for doing this and people appreciate it. And it's so simple. It's just sending a reminder email to the client and to the agent before the inspection. Now, we send them 24 hours before, but you can send them whatever you want, 12, 8, 6, 4, 2, 1 hour, whatever. And you can send more than one, by the way. This is another tool in Horizon. Our automated email engine called Horizon Marketer actually has this all set up for you and 15 others. So there are a whole bunch of emails at your fingertips. And again, you just flip a switch, turn it on, and you don't have to think about it again. It happens automatically for you on every inspection. It's a very valuable tool. And what I love about it is in the early days, every now and again, we would show up at a property only to realize we had the address wrong, or we'd show up at the right address, but we would be at the wrong time or even on the wrong date. And that's a huge waste of your time. And your time is the biggest asset that you have. It's what you have to sell. So those kinds of things, A, make you look unprofessional, B, cost you money, and C, are completely unnecessary just by turning on the email reminders in Horizon. Plain and simple, just do it. Okay. I think about getting to inspections at least 15 minutes early is kind of table stakes. And I know not everybody agrees with me, but one of my colleagues, Sal, has a saying that being early is on time, being on time is late, and being late is completely unacceptable. I kind of like that. I think it puts you in better control if you were there before your client and agent arrives. It gives you a chance to see the territory and kind of think things out and be ready to go. I also think you need to make sure you've got everything with you. Nothing makes you look worse than having a flashlight with batteries that are fading partway through the inspection. You need your tools in good order. You need all your tools. There's all kinds of lists of tools in our training equipment, and those lists of tools kind of vary depending on where you are and who you are. But things like ladders, flashlights, moisture meters, electrical testers, and so on, a carpenter's awl for probing, there are all kinds of things. And depending on how far you want to go, you can set up your toolkit but you need to maintain it. Appropriate types of screwdrivers, all that kind of stuff. Lots of information around about what you need there. But putting yourself in a position of control early on is a really good thing to do. Now, the other thing I love to do is be 100% sure I know the client's name and the agent's name. And it sounds so stupid, but sometimes people introduce themselves and you're not sure whether you're talking to the agent or the client. They may give you a card if they're the agent, they may not. So you really need to know. Pull out your work order, pull up your work order on your phone. If you're a Horizon user, it's right there at your fingertips and you've got all that information. So you need to know who the players are. And there's a couple of other things that are really helpful to have. If the client booking the inspection had said, I'm really worried about the roof, that'll show up on your work order, at least if you use Horizon. And so you can say to the client in that opening conversation, I understand you have some concerns about the roof, and we'll be sure to take a really good look at that. In fact, we're going to start with the roof. So it displays your understanding of their needs, and it displays your good communication within your company. It makes them feel like you are in control of the situation. It's respectful, it's professional, and it builds your credibility. Now, the other thing that you might find on the work order is if you've worked with that agent before, your Horizon work order shows you how many times you've worked with that agent, but more importantly, the last time you worked with them, including the address and the client name and the date of the inspection. So if the agent arrives first, and I wouldn't have this conversation in front of the client, and I'll tell you why in a minute. If the agent arrives first, it's a very engaging, respectful, professional thing to do to say, so how did that inspection go for the Smiths on Browning Avenue last month, or whatever it is? Now, the reason that I don't do that if the client is there is I don't want the client to think that I am too close to the real estate agent. I don't want them to think, hey, the inspector and the agent are best friends. Now I'm starting to wonder about the agent's impartiality and the inspector's impartiality. So we keep a respectful professional distance from agents when we're working with clients. So a couple of thoughts there. But again, that being forewarned is forearmed kind of thing, having that at your fingertips and looking at that, another reason to arrive early. Give yourself a couple of minutes to pick those pieces of information off the work order, and you're going to look great. Okay, this is a silly one, but wait a minute. I'm going to say it's silly. It's only silly once you've looked foolish. So it's only silly if you haven't already looked foolish, maybe. In any case, what I'm trying to say is if you park in the driveway, a couple of bad things might happen. And these are things we've learned from experience, by the way. One of the joys of talking to somebody who's been in business for 43 years like me is I've made most of the mistakes you can possibly make. If I can save you a few along the way, that's pretty helpful, I hope. So one of the mistakes we've made, parking in the driveway. Now, what's bad about that? A, there might not be a spot for your client to park or the agent to park. B, they might park behind you. And if you're done your inspection and you want to leave and they're still talking about the house, about signing the waiver, about moving forward, you have to disturb them to get them to move a vehicle. C, if you park in the driveway, the seller's car might be in the garage and the seller might need to go out. And if you're blocking them, it's disruptive to the whole inspection process and annoying to the seller. So please don't park in the driveway, especially if your vehicle leaks oil, by the way, but that's a whole different thing. Okay, so the corollary to that rule is this one. And this, well, I'm just going to tell you the story of what happened and you'll get the message. So back in the day, even then, we took pride in always being early for inspections. We were always ahead of time. And so I go to an inspection, I leave early, I'm in great shape, I'm ahead of time, and I get there, and I'm not going to park in the driveway because I know that's not the right thing to do. But there's no parking on the street. And I drive around the block and I still can't find any parking. By the time I found a place to park, I'm about 3.5 blocks away. And I'm lugging my ladder and my tools. I finally get to the house and the agent and client are there. And the agent's kind of wondering what's going on because they know we're always early. So I'm 4 minutes late for the inspection. And I go, I am so sorry to be late, but parking is just impossible around here. The words come out of my mouth and the client pauses, looks at the agent and says, hey, that's right. I never thought about that. Well, to make a long story short, that was the last time I worked with that agent. So we're going to talk a little bit down the road at some point about staying in your lane in some discussion. And that's a good example of you comment on the things that are within your scope. Remember, we talked about standards of practice. You don't comment on neighborhood amenities, parking, that kind of stuff. It's just not the thing to do. So there you have it. There's about 10 things that I think are super critical before you start your inspection. I'm going to leave it at that for now. I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks so much for watching.